The neon haze of Vega Prime's outskirts led through the greasy windows of the blue plate. A tired diner wedged between shuttered factories and half-lit hollow billboards promising cheap stimulants no one could afford. Inside, the hum of malfunctioning ceiling fans mixed with the clatter of utensils. But the place was half empty. Just a few non-human laborers hunched over bowls of broth. Alex Morgan moved among them with quiet efficiency, his broad shoulders carrying more weight than just the tray in his hand. At 32, he had the kind of weathered look that came from years of work that never led anywhere. But his gray eyes still held a stubborn flicker of decency. He wiped a spotless counter again, not because it needed it, but because staying busy kept his thoughts from dwelling on how out of place he always was in this city of spires and species. To the Vexorian owner, Crawl, Alex was just another human useful for scrubbing floors and taking abuse, never trusted for more. Still, Alex endured. Work was work, and his rent didn't care about dignity. The door chime cut through the drone of background noise, and Alex glanced up to see a figure stumble into the diner. The alien who entered looked as if he had wandered out of a history book frail. Pale blue skin stretched thin across bones, a cloak hanging from his frame like it might drag him down with its weight. His large eyes, once perhaps sharp, were now clouded, darting as though searching for a memory that refused to surface. He swayed, gripping the doorframe for balance. No one moved. The laborers lowered their gazes, uninterested or unwilling to get involved. Alex's feet carried him forward before he'd even decided to act. "Sir, can I help you?" he asked softly, catching the elder's elbow and guiding him to a booth by the window. The old alien's voice trembled as he tried to answer, words trailing into confusion. "When was the last time you ate?" Alex asked gently, crouching beside him. The question seemed to hurt more than help. The alien frowned as if trying to summon a meal from the fog of his memory. Alex didn't wait. He disappeared into the kitchen, ignoring Crawl's sharp look, and put together the simplest, safest meal he knew, broth and soft bread. When he returned, he found the old alien staring blankly through the glass at the blur of neon outside. "Here you go, sir." "On the house," Alex said, setting the bowl down with deliberate care. The man's hands shook as he took the spoon, but once the first taste touched his lips, he ate with a slow, deliberate focus, as if relearning how to nourish himself. "Thank you, young man," he murmured between spoonfuls, his voice broken but sincere. "Kindness. Unexpected." Alex smiled faintly, brushing it off. "It's nothing. My name's Alex." The elder tried to respond, stumbled on his own name, frustration etching deep lines across his face. Alex touched his shoulder. "It's all right. Take your time." The reprieve shattered as Crawl's booming voice sliced across the room. "Morgan." The few diners startled, heads turning as the Vexorian stormed out from behind the partition. His dark suit strained against his broad chest, 4 nostrils flaring with anger, and his 4 eyes burned like hot coals. "What do you think you're doing?" Alex rose, jaw tightening. This man needed help. Crawl's lip curled, exposing the serrated teeth of his species. "This isn't a charity. You gave away food without authorization." "I'll pay for it myself," Alex countered, standing firm. "It's not about credits, human," Crawl hissed, stepping closer, his voice thick with contempt. "It's about authority. My authority, which you seem determined to undermine with your sentimental weakness." Behind him, the elder alien kept eating slowly, oblivious to the confrontation. "Then fire me if compassion is such a crime," Alex said evenly, though his pulse raced. "Gladly, pack your things. You're done here." The diner fell into silence, alien faces watching, but none daring to speak. Alex untied his apron, tossed it onto the counter. Better to be unemployed than heartless, he said, and turned toward the door. Before he could take 3 steps, the low hum of engines outside swelled into a deep vibration that rattled the diner's windows. A sleek hover limo descended in a wash of light, its polished surface gleaming against the grime of the street. Patrons pressed closer to the glass, breath-catching. This kind of vehicle never came here. The doors hissed open, and a figure emerged, tall and radiant against the neon gloom. Her pearl-blue skin seemed to glow from within, silver hair cascading down her back like a spill of liquid light. She moved with a grace that quieted the room more completely than Kroll's rage ever could, flanked by armored guards whose mirrored visors swept the diner with clinical precision. The air itself seemed to shift as her turquoise eyes scanned the room, freezing when they landed on the frail old man in the booth. Her voice, melodic and commanding, carried across the silence. "Grandfather." Every head turned as the elder looked up from his bowl, recognition flickering at last. "Mina," he whispered. "Is that you, child?" Gasps spread through the diner as realization struck. This wasn't just an old wanderer. He was Elder Theron of House Astralis, and the woman now standing in the blue plate was his granddaughter, Mina Nix, one of the most powerful nobles on Vega Prime, and she was staring straight at Alex Morgan, stood rigid in the sudden quiet, the weight of every gaze pressing down on him as Mina Nix crossed the floor with the fluid certainty of someone who had never been questioned a day in her life. The armored guards parted the way, their heavy boots thudding against the diner's cracked tiles. And Kroll, who had moments earlier been a tyrant, shrank against the counter, his 4 eyes darting nervously between the noblewoman and the human he had just cast out. Mina dropped gracefully to her knees beside the elder, her violet gown pooling like spilled ink across the scuffed floor. She cupped the old man's face with hands that trembled just slightly, the tenderness of her touch out of place in this run-down room. "We've searched every district for you," she whispered, her melodic voice carrying to every corner. "How did you wander so far?" Theron blinked at her, then pointed with a frail hand toward Alex. "This human gave me food." His words, simple and true, landed heavier than any accusation. Mina's gaze lifted, turquoise eyes meeting Alex's gray ones across the room. It was not a casual glance. It was deliberate, piercing, and when it lingered, Alex felt as though the ground had tilted beneath his feet. Kroll, scrambling for survival, forced a sickly smile and bowed so low his nostrils nearly touched the floor. "Lady Nix, what an honor had I known the elder was of your esteemed house. I would—" "Silence," Mina said, her voice no louder than before, but edged with iron that left Kroll gaping. "Is it true you fired this man for helping my grandfather?" The Vexorian's blue skin blanched to lavender as the entire diner waited. "A misunderstanding," he croaked. "I asked a question," Mina pressed, her eyes unblinking. Kroll hesitated, then muttered, "Yes." The room seemed to exhale, a ripple of shock sweeping through the onlookers. Mina turned back to Alex, and in that instant her face soft, as though she shed a mask of nobility and looked at him simply as a woman, acknowledging another soul. "What is your name?" she asked. Alex swallowed, aware of the grease stains on his uniform, the day's stubble on his jaw, the absurdity of his position. "Alex Morgan, ma'am." She repeated the name as if tasting his weight. Then she rose, her silver hair catching the diner's harsh lights, and stepped close enough that Alex could smell the faint spice of her perfume, like rain on hot stone. "Alex Morgan, you have shown kindness to Elder Theron, Patriarch of House Astralis. Such debts are not forgotten. You will dine with us tomorrow evening at our estate, as an honored guest." She pressed a small iridescent card into his palm, her fingers brushing his with deliberate pause, a gesture equal parts formality and invitation. Transportation will be arranged." Alex barely had time to nod before she turned, slipping her arm beneath her grandfather's and guiding him toward the door, her guards falling into step. At the threshold, she paused, her voice calm but final. "This establishment is hereby blacklisted from all Astralis holdings." Krawl's protest died in his throat as the door hissed shut behind them, leaving only the echo of engines outside as the hover limo lifted into the night sky. Silence reigned once more, but it was a silence different from before, no longer indifferent, but charged, every patron staring at Alex with a mix of awe, envy, and disbelief. He glanced down at the card in his hand, its surface shimmering with embedded light, then looked up at Krawl's ashen face. For the first time in months, Alex smiled. "Guess I'd better go home and find something decent to wear." The following evening came too quickly. Alex stood before the cracked mirror in his modest apartment, fingers fumbling with the collar of his only formal shirt, a navy piece tucked away for funerals and rare celebrations. He had shaved, trimmed his hair, even shined his shoes, but still he looked like what he was, a man from the city's fringes about to step into a world that was never meant for him. The low hum of engines outside drew him to the window, where a sleek black hover car waited, bearing the unmistakable crest of House Astralis. His throat tightened. This was no longer some surreal daydream. It was happening. The driver, a stoic Vexorian in crisp livery, opened the door without a word. Alex slid into the plush interior, the scent of polished wood and alien spices enveloping him as the vehicle glided through the city. Neon grime gave way to gleaming towers, manicured gardens, and sky bridges of glass and light. The Astralis estate emerged at last, sprawling and ethereal, its pearlescent walls shimmering like moonstone beneath the twin suns' dying glow. Alex exhaled slowly, pressing his palms against his knees to steady himself. Whatever awaited inside, he knew one thing: his life had already changed. All because he had chosen to show kindness when no one else would. The Astralis estate was a dream sculpted in light and curve, its halls whispering with echoes of wealth and lineage as Alex was ushered past towering archways and walls that seemed to breathe with pearlescent shimmer. He tried not to gape, tried to hold his shoulders square, but every step reminded him he was a stranger walking through a realm that had never made room for people like him. Servants in flowing robes bowed slightly as he passed, some with polite curiosity, others with veiled disdain at the human in their midst. At the end of a long corridor, double doors opened onto a dining chamber alive with soft music and suspended orbs of light that pulsed gently above an elongated crystal table set with dishes, whose shapes and colors defied his earthly memory. Elder Theron sat at the far end, looking stronger than he had in the diner, draped in dignified attire that disguised his frailty. When his clouded eyes found Alex, they lit briefly, and he lifted a hand in welcome. Mina stood nearby in a gown of deep teal that shimmered like water at dusk, her silver hair arranged in a crown of braids that glinted in the glow. She smiled faintly, and for a moment Alex forgot about the guards, the servants. Even the tension knotting his stomach dot, and the room's temperature seemed to shift, as if shadow had slithered in alongside him. From a side entrance strode Commander Dorn, scales burnished gold and uniform heavy with metals. His amber eyes fixed on Alex like a hawk sighting prey, and though his lips curled into a smile, it was sharp, all edges, and no warmth. "So this is the human," he said, voice rich with false charm, the waiter elevated to guest at House Astralis. He took Mina's hand without permission, brushing it with his scaled lips, then turned to Theron. "My lord, I must question the wisdom of granting such." Casual charity. Alex forced himself to remain still, though every nerve itched to recoil from the contempt woven in those words. Mina's turquoise eyes narrowed, but she did not interrupt. Instead, She gestured for Alex to sit opposite Dorn, as though daring both men to occupy the same air. The meal unfolded like theater, courses of delicacies arriving on hovering trays, each more elaborate than the last. Alex tasted carefully, aware of the eyes watching him, but said little, preferring to observe. Dorn, however, filled every silence with boasts military victories, political alliances, proposals for Mina's hand cloaked as strategic necessity. His words dripped with confidence, yet beneath them, Alex caught a note of desperation, as though the commander was playing a part that no longer commanded its stage. When Dorn finally turned his attention to Alex, his smile widened like a knife. "Tell me, human, what exactly do you do besides serve tables?" Alex swallowed his sip of water. "Until yesterday, I was a waiter." "Ah," Dorn laughed, the sound grating. "And now you dine among nobles. Quite the promotion." "Kindness requires no promotion," Mina interjected coolly, her eyes fixed on Alex. "It requires courage." Her words hung in the air like a challenge, and Dorn's scales darkened by a shade. Though his smile remained fixed out after the meal, Mina invited Alex to walk the gardens. Dorn moved to object, but Elder Theron's thin voice cut through the tension. "Let my granddaughter choose her companions, Commander. You are not family here." The words, soft though they were, landed like a gavel. Dorn inclined his head stiffly, his amber eyes glowing with restrained fury, and watched as Mina took Alex's arm and led him toward the moonlit pathways beyond the dining hall. Yet even as Alex felt the cool night air and the strange beauty of bioluminescent blossoms unfurling in the dark, a shiver traced his spine. He could feel Dorn's gaze burning between his shoulder blades long after they had left the chamber, a promise of reckoning wrapped in silence. And though Mina's hand on his arm steadied him, Alex knew with unshakable certainty that stepping into this world of marble and moonlight had made him more than a guest. He had become a target. The night after the dinner seemed to stretch in Alex's memory like a taut wire, every detail sharp with tension. He had felt Mina's hand warm against his arm in the gardens, had listened to her speak of constellations and family duty beneath the twin moons, and for a fragile moment he believed perhaps kindness alone could carve out a place for him in this world. But dawn shattered that hope with the pounding of boots and the blare of official voices. His chamber doors burst open to a squad of Vega Prime intelligence officers, their armor gleaming and their weapons raised. Mina bolted upright from the adjoining room, her hair loose around her shoulders, outrage flashing in her turquoise eyes. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded. The lead officer ignored her, gaze fixed on Alex. "Alexander Morgan, you are under arrest for espionage against the Confederation and infiltration of House Australis under false pretenses." Alex's pulse hammered as two guards seized his arms, shackles locking around his wrists with a cold snap. "This is a mistake," he said, his voice rough with disbelief. And then the final nail drove in. Commander Dorn entered behind them, his golden scales glinting cruelly in the morning light, his amber eyes gleaming with triumph. "No mistake," he said smoothly, producing a datapad that projected falsified transmissions between Alex and Terran military command. "Irrefutable evidence," he added, his gaze sliding toward Mina with feigned sympathy. "I warned you, my lady, but you let your heart blind your judgment." Mina's lips parted in shock, her eyes flicking between Alex and the damning holograms, doubt battling trust in their depths. Alex shook his head violently. "It's a setup, Mina. You know me. You know this isn't true." But her silence carved deeper than Dorn's lies, and as the guards dragged Alex from the room, the last thing he saw was Dorn's clawed hand resting possessively on her shoulder. The detention cell stank of metal and recycled air, its humming energy field reminding Alex with every pulse how powerless he had become. He paced the narrow space, fury and despair knotting in his chest. All for a bowl of soup, he thought bitterly, though he knew it had never been that simple. Dorn wanted him erased, and the council would likely oblige humans were tolerated, not trusted. The field flickered, and a guard entered with a tray of food. Alex looked up and recognized him instantly. Nix, the quiet alien who had once worked beside him at the blue plate. The server set the tray down loudly for the cameras, and leaned close enough to whisper, "The Elder sent me. Be ready at the third shift change." His hand slipped a small data chip beneath the stale bread before he strode out again. Alex snatched it up, heart surging with a fragile ember of hope. Hours later, alarms shrieked through the detention block. The force field collapsed in a cascade of sparks, and Nix reappeared with a guard's uniform. "Quickly," he hissed. Alex stripped and changed, the ill-fitting armor biting at his skin. "Where am I going?" "Service exit, level 3. "Transport waits," Nix whispered, pressing a small guidance device into his palm. "The Elder is gathering proof of your innocence. Until then, you must stay hidden." Their eyes met, and Nix added, "We've seen what you did in that diner. We believe in you." Then he was gone, vanishing into the smoke of the false alarms. Alex followed the guidance device through winding maintenance corridors, every step fueled by adrenaline, until he stumbled into a loading bay where a small transport craft waited. The pilot turned, hood falling back to reveal Mina's face, pale with determination. "You," Alex breathed. "Did you think I'd let someone else rescue you?" She said, her voice strained but steady, "My grandfather has uncovered Dorn's pattern. This is not the first time he has manufactured crimes against humans. But we must disappear before he silences us both." She guided the craft into the sky, weaving between patrols, her hands sure on the controls. Alex strapped in, still reeling from the whiplash of betrayal and rescue. "Why help me, if you doubted me?" he asked. Her eyes flicked to him, shimmering with something raw. "Because doubt is not the same as disbelief. What we shared bound us, Alex. In my people's ways, such intimacy is a vow. I should have trusted it from the start." They descended into the skeletal remains of the old industrial district, where derelict factories crouched like forgotten giants. Mina landed outside a nondescript processing facility and guided him inside. To Alex's astonishment, the interior had been remade into a secure refuge living quarters hidden behind rusted walls, weapon caches tucked behind false panels. "My grandfather insisted on safe houses," Mina explained, keying in security codes with practiced ease. "He said the city's stability was an illusion. Now I understand why." Alex stared at her, admiration rising with his gratitude. "Your grandfather may forget his past, but he hasn't forgotten how to fight." Mina stepped close, her fingers brushing his chest. "Nor have you, human. And together, perhaps we can survive what comes next." In that dim light, amidst the hum of buried machines, Alex realized that whatever else Dorn planned, he and Mina were no longer just survivor and rescuer. They were partners in a war neither had chosen. But both were now bound to fight. The industrial safe house thrummed with a low, steady hum as if the walls themselves were bracing for the storm. For 3 days, Alex and Mina lived in tense reprieve, their nights filled with whispered plans and stolen moments, their days haunted by the knowledge that Commander Dorn's shadow stretched long. Then the courier came, a reptilian creature trembling as it delivered a secure data cube into Mina's hands. "The Elder says hurry," it rasped before vanishing into the smog. When Mina slotted the cube into the transmitter, streams of evidence lit the room. Dorn's secret dealings with the Nexus Syndicate, resource transfers, falsified reports, and worst of all, a coordinated plan to strike 3 human colonies within the week. Alex's jaw tightened as he stared at the files. If this reaches the council, they'll stall, argue, bury it in procedure. We don't have that kind of time. Mina's eyes glowed with conviction. Then we bypass them. The human underground has channels, doesn't it? Alex nodded grimly. Yes, but once we broadcast, Dorn will know exactly where we are. Mina's silver hair caught the transmitter's glow as she drew her weapon and checked the charge. Then we hold long enough for the truth to outlast him. The transmission began with a pulse that disguised itself as background radiation, invisible to untrained eyes. A countdown shimmered across the console. 10 minutes until completion. Almost on cue, the perimeter alarms shrieked. Through grainy security feeds, they saw Dorn's transports descend like carrion birds, squads of armored troops pouring into the district. They're not here to arrest us, Alex muttered as the first explosions rattled the walls. They're here to erase us and the evidence. Mina stood shoulder to shoulder with him, her turquoise eyes calm despite the storm. 7 minutes, she said. Let's make them count. The front wall shuddered and buckled, fire and smoke swallowing the entrance as the first wave breached. Alex's combat instincts, buried since leaving Earth, surged back. He moved low and fast, firing precise bursts meant to cripple rather than kill. Soldiers stumbled as shots tore weapons from their hands or sent them sprawling with scorched armor. Mina was a dancer with her pistol, every movement fluid, every shot true, her people's elegance turned into deadly precision. They fought in tandem, back to back, their breath sinking, their trust absolute. Between blasts of plasma and the hiss of ricochets, Alex heard her laugh once a sharp, defiant sound that made him believe they might just survive. But the second wave came heavier, with breech cannons that reduced their cover to molten slag. 4 minutes left. They retreated deeper, the transmitter still humming behind them, its countdown unforgiving. Dust filled the air as a massive figure stepped through the breach, golden scales gleaming like molten metal. Commander Dorn himself. His amber eyes burned with righteous fury as he leveled his weapon at Alex. I should have crushed you the night you dared touch her. He snarled. A human waiter, nothing more. You think compassion earns you a place in this galaxy? You are a disease, and I am the cure. Alex stood his ground, chest heaving, weapon raised but steady. No, he said, voice low but clear. You're the disease. Feeding fear, sowing hate, turning trust into weapons. Humanity may be stubborn, may be flawed, but when someone needs help, we act. That's why I gave your elder soup when everyone else looked away. That's why you'll lose. Mina added, her own weapon aimed unflinching, because kindness, not cruelty, is what survives. Dorn's scales darkened, fury vibrating often as he lifted his weapon. Then die with your human pet, Mina. He fired just as the wall behind him exploded inward in a storm of light and smoke. Confederation security forces surged through, their insignia gleaming, weapons raised not at Alex, but at Dorn. Elder Theron stepped into the breach, his frail body framed by authority that made the soldiers pause. His voice carried more strength than Alex had ever heard. Commander Dorn, by order of the Confederation Council, you are under arrest for treason, conspiracy, and the attempted extermination of innocents. Dorn roared, trying to spin his weapon, but a dozen security blasts pinned him to the ground. Shackled, he spat venomous promises at Alex. This isn't over, human. My allies will finish what I began. Theron's lined face softened as he turned to Alex and Mina. Is the transmission complete? Alex checked the console, heart pounding, then exhaled in relief. Yes, the colonies have the warning. They're evacuating and preparing defenses. Mina lowered her weapon, shoulders trembling, eyes meeting Alex's. Then we did it. In the silence that followed, broken only by the hum of the finished transmission and Dorn's growl of defeat. Alex realized that in 10 minutes they had not only survived, but changed the course of countless lives across the stars. 1 year later, Vega Prime's Central District glowed with a different kind of light. Where once neon signs flickered over shuttered shops and smoky bars, now a broad corner radiated warmth from a glass-fronted building, crowned by a single word written in bold letters of both Terran and Astralis. Script: Crossroads. Inside, the air buzzed with conversation, the mingled scents of earth spices and Astralis herbs weaving together. Laughter of species that had once barely tolerated sharing streets now raised over shared tables. Alex Morgan stood at the entrance, no longer in a grease-stained uniform, but in a tailored black jacket stitched with subtle emblems. Earth's blue star interlocked with Astralis's silver crest. Guests greeted him with bows, handshakes, or gestures of their own cultures, and he answered each with the same easy warmth that had once carried him through the blue plate's hostile shifts. He guided a Vexorian delegation to their booth, checked on a pair of Terran miners discovering Astralis deserts for the first time, and smiled as he caught sight of Nyx, the old blue plate server turned Crossroads, headwaiter moving gracefully through the dining room, his presence a reminder of how unlikely allies could shape revolutions. In the corner sat Elder Theron, healthier than Alex had ever seen him, his mind sharpened by renewed purpose. The old patriarch raised a glass when Alex passed. "Do you know what the ambassadors told me yesterday?" he asked with a sly grin. "That more progress has been made at your tables than in a dozen council sessions." Alex laughed, but his hand slipped unconsciously to the pocket where a small box rested, its weight heavier than armor. Tonight, after the last table was cleared, he would ask Mina what had lived in his heart since the gardens of her family estate. Theron's eyes twinkled knowingly. "Don't keep her waiting too long, boy. The council already approved the interspecies license. First of its kind. I may have expedited." Alex shook his head, speechless at the old man's mischief. "You didn't have to." "Nonsense," Theron cut in. "After what you two did, after saving colonies and unmasking traitors, the galaxy owes you far more than paperwork." His expression softened. "Besides, I want to see my granddaughter happy before my memory wanders again." A commotion at the door pulled Alex's attention. Crawl, the Vexorian boss who had once spat contempt at him, now shuffled uncertainly inside. His skin had faded to a nervous lavender, his posture hunched in apology. "If there's room," Crawl stammered, "I'd like to try a meal." For a heartbeat, the room seemed to hold its breath, but Alex only smiled and guided him to a small table. "There's always room here," he said simply. "That's the point." Crawl blinked, then nodded, his gaze dropping as if the weight of old arrogance was too much to carry. Alex returned to his rounds, checking on an Andorian ambassador, laughing with a human Astralis couple on their first date, pausing to explain Earth's tea ritual to a cluster of curious, alien children. When the last guest departed and Crossroads lights dimmed to a softer glow, Mina appeared from the kitchen, silver hair tied back, her pearl blue skin luminous under the lanterns. She looked tired but radiant, her turquoise eyes brightening when they found Alex. "Everything all right tonight?" she asked, brushing flour from her hands. "Perfect," he said, and led her through the back door into the alley. But the alley was no longer grim. It had been transformed into a private garden, a miniature echo of the Astralis estate's moonlit paths. Floating lights shimmered above a table set for two, flowers from both worlds entwined in vases, their colors blending into something wholly new. Mina gasped softly, her hand flying to her lips. "Alex? When did you—" "With Nyx's help," he admitted, pulling out her chair. A bottle of rare Astralis nectar gleamed in the chiller. They sat, and for a long moment said nothing. Only watching the twin moons climb over the city skyline. At last Alex drew the box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a ring forged of Earth's metals and Australis gems, light bending in prismatic fire across its facets. His voice trembled, but his eyes did not waver. On Earth, when we want to share our lives, we make an offer like this. Mina Nix of House Australis, will you marry me? Her turquoise eyes widened, then softened with tears that caught the moonlight. You would bind yourself to me, even with our differences? Alex reached across the table, his warm human hand covering her cool fingers. Because of our differences. Crossroads works because it blends two worlds. So do we. She lifted the ring and his hand, pressing it to her cheek. In Australis tradition, we say, my path joins with yours across all stars and seasons. Yes, Alex Morgan. My path is yours. She leaned forward, and their kiss sealed not just their bond, but the promise of every bridge they had built together. Inside, the restaurant hummed with lingering warmth, species mingling who a year ago would not have shared a table. Outside, in the quiet of the transformed alley, Alex and Mina held each other as the future opened wide before them. The waiter who had been fired for kindness had become something far greater proof that compassion, simple and stubborn, could topple lies and conspiracies and carve a new embassy of hope at the crossroads of the stars. Dawn spilled across Vega Prime's skyline like molten glass, the twin suns gilding the spires in a brilliance that touched every surface of the city. And for the first time, Alex Morgan felt he was truly seeing this world as his own. Crossroads hummed with preparations for the day, its staff weaving between hydroponic columns and polished tables, adjusting hollow menus that now displayed dishes from 15 different systems. Nix briefed the servers with calm authority, his once cautious voice steady and confident, while Elder Theron lingered in his favorite booth, an old lion watching the pride he had nurtured flourish. Mina emerged from the kitchen in her chef's whites, silver hair tied back, turquoise eyes glowing with both pride and anticipation. On her finger gleamed the interspecies engagement ring, its twin-world design refracting the morning light. When Alex joined her, apron slung over his jacket, they exchanged a glance that spoke of sleepless nights, perilous escapes, and a love forged in the crucible of danger. Their quiet moment was shattered by a commotion at the entrance. A delegation from the Confederation Council filed in, their insignias heavy with authority. Murmurs rippled across the room. This was no casual visit. At their head strode Councillor Verix, a tall, silver-scaled official whose reputation for rigid neutrality had earned both respect and fear. His gaze swept the restaurant, taking in the mingling of species, the laughter rising over shared plates, and something almost like wonder flickered in his otherwise cold eyes. Alex Morgan, Mina Nix of House Australis, he intoned, his voice carrying like a judge pronouncing verdict. The council recognizes Crossroads as a sanctioned diplomatic venue. From this day forward, your establishment will serve not only as a restaurant, but as an official embassy between humanity and Australis. Gasps filled the room, some joyous, some incredulous. Alex stood frozen, the weight of the announcement pressing into him harder than the chains of his detention cell ever had. Mina's fingers slipped into his, grounding him. You see? She whispered. Your kindness has already written laws. But before relief could settle, a low vibration shuddered through the floor. Alarms shrieked outside as holofeeds activated across the spires, displaying the face of Commander Dorn, scales dulled but eyes burning with fanatical rage. Shackled, yet somehow hijacking the transmission feed, he spat his last venomous promise. You think this human and his brood of sympathizers have saved you? The syndicate endures. My allies wear council robes. Enjoy your fragile peace, for it will shatter soon. Guards cut the signal, but the unease lingered like smoke. All eyes turned to Alex and Mina, searching for reassurance. Alex felt the weight of expectation pressing against the fragile bond they had built, but instead of shrinking, he rose. Dorn was wrong then, and he is wrong now, he said, voice steady. We are proof that fear doesn't have the last word. This place, this embassy, is our answer. We stand together, human and Astralis, side by side. No syndicate, no commander. No lies can unmake what's been forged here. Mina squeezed his hand, her eyes fierce with pride. And Elder Theron raised his glass in solemn agreement. The crowd erupted, not in panic, but in applause. An affirmation that what had begun in a dingy diner with a bowl of soup now carried the weight of a movement. Alex looked around the bustling room, at Kroll awkwardly helping set tables as penance, at Nix barking orders like a seasoned lieutenant, at strangers turned all eyes breaking bread together. And he understood, with clarity that seared through him, that this was the true shocking reveal. His firing had not been an ending, but a beginning, a catalyst that reshaped the course of two peoples. Outside, the suns climbed higher, washing Vega Prime in gold, and inside Crossroads, the future unfolded not in council chambers or battlefields, but over meals, conversations, and the stubborn flame of compassion that refused to die. Alex tightened his grip on Nina's hand, knowing their path would be long and perilous, but also certain that as long as kindness held, humanity had already claimed its place among the stars.